My name is Ayla Carter, and for 3 years, I was the invisible backbone of Blackridge Solutions. I trained their staff. I fixed their systems. I built processes no one else understood. Yet one morning, I was called into a glass meeting room and accused of training fraud. They said I overcharged. They said I manipulated records. They said I was replaceable. So they fired me. What they didn't know was simple. The company building, the licenses, and the operating rights were legally mine. And within weeks, I would evict them from their own company. Ayla Carter still remembered her first morning at Blackridge Solutions like it was frozen in time. The lobby was all glass and chrome, designed to impress clients, not comfort employees. People rushed past her with coffee cups and forced smiles, already exhausted before the day had properly begun. Ayla stood there quietly, holding a thin folder that contained her contract, her certifications, and years of hard-earned experience that no one inside truly understood yet. She wasn't hired as an executive. She wasn't hired as a partner. Her title was simple: training and development consultant. But from the moment she stepped into the first training room, it became obvious. Blackridge didn't just need her. They were quietly dependent on her. The company had grown too fast. New hires arrived every week, yet no one knew how systems actually worked. Departments blamed each other for delays. Managers spoke confidently in meetings but panicked behind closed doors. Their training program was a mess: outdated slides, contradictory instructions, and no measurable structure. Ayla fixed all of it. She rebuilt the onboarding process from scratch. She created step-by-step operational manuals so clear that even interns could follow them. She trained team leads, corrected senior managers, and restructured workflows without ever raising her voice. When employees were confused, they came to her. When systems failed, IT quietly asked for her help. Within months, productivity rose. Errors dropped. Client complaints disappeared. The board praised the results, but never mentioned her name. Ayla noticed everything. She noticed how executives took credit during quarterly meetings. She noticed how her reports were forwarded without attribution. She noticed how her access quietly expanded while her authority never did. Still, she stayed professional. Calm. Focused. Because Ayla wasn't the kind of woman who demanded recognition. She was the kind who built leverage. Late evenings became routine. She stayed after hours, documenting processes no one else understood. She studied compliance laws, training certifications, and operational licenses, not because it was required, but because something about Blackridge felt unstable. The founders were ambitious, but careless. They rushed signatures. They skipped fine print. When the company faced a financial squeeze one year, they approached Ayla casually, asking if she would temporarily help by investing through one of her consulting entities. She agreed. Quietly. Carefully. Legally. From that moment on, Ayla was no longer just an employee. She was a foundation. But Blackridge never saw her that way. To them, she was still just the trainer, replaceable, invisible, convenient. And that misunderstanding would soon cost them everything. The email arrived at 9:17 a.m. No subject line. Just a calendar invite titled Internal Review Meeting. Ayla read it once, then again. Something about it felt wrong. Reviews at Blackridge were never sudden. They were usually wrapped in polite warnings, fake smiles, and weeks of performance alignment meetings. This one came out of nowhere. Still, she accepted the invite. By the time she reached the executive floor, the air felt heavier than usual. The glass-walled conference room was already occupied. The CFO sat at the far end of the table, fingers steepled, eyes distant. HR was there too, tight smile, legal pad unopened. No one offered Ayla a seat. That's when she knew. The meeting didn't start with feedback. It started with accusations. They claimed there were irregularities in her training invoices. That she had logged hours that couldn't be verified. That her external consulting entity had charged excessive fees over the last year. Ayla listened without interrupting. She asked for documentation. They said it was under review. She asked for specific examples. They spoke in generalities. The word fraud wasn't said at first, but it hovered in the room like poison. Finally, the CFO leaned forward and said it plainly. We believe there has been intentional misrepresentation related to training services. Ayla felt the shift, not fear, not anger, but clarity. This wasn't an investigation. This was a decision already made. HR slid a termination letter across the table. Immediate dismissal. Breach of trust. Company reputation at risk. Her access would be revoked by noon. No discussion. No appeal. Ayla looked down at the paper. Her name was spelled correctly. The reasons were vague. The signature block was already filled. She smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. They didn't ask her to defend herself. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a scapegoat, someone skilled enough to blame, but quiet enough to discard. She stood up calmly. I'll need copies of the allegations, she said evenly. And confirmation that my consulting contracts are being terminated as well. The room went silent. They hadn't thought that far. The CFO cleared his throat. Our legal team will be in touch. Ayla nodded. Good. By the time she returned to her desk, her system access was already restricted. Files she had created over 3 years now showed permission denied. Her email logged out mid-refresh. Security arrived 10 minutes later. Not because she resisted, but because they wanted to make a point. Employees watched as she packed her bag. Some avoided eye contact. Others looked confused. A few looked guilty. Ayla didn't explain. She didn't argue. She walked out with her head high. As the elevator doors closed, her phone vibrated. A message from her lawyer. If they terminated you today, we can activate Clause 7 immediately. Ayla smiled to herself. Blackridge thought they had ended a problem. In reality, they had just triggered a countdown. Ayla didn't go home after being fired. Instead, she drove straight to her private office across town, the one Blackridge executives barely knew existed. It was registered under her consulting firm's name, small on the outside, but precise and disciplined inside. No glass walls. No empty slogans. Just quiet power. She placed her bag on the desk, removed her blazer, and opened the locked drawer she hadn't touched in months. Inside was a slim black folder. Blackridge Solutions, Legal and Asset Agreements. This wasn't revenge planning. This was preparation, done years ago. When Blackridge had faced its first serious cash flow crisis, the founders had panicked. Payroll was late. Vendors were circling. Their expansion plans were collapsing under debt. In that moment of desperation, they had turned to the one person who always fixed things quietly. Ayla. They asked for a short-term investment. Nothing formal, they said. Just support until things stabilized. Ayla had agreed, but on her terms. Through her holding company, she injected capital in exchange for temporary operational guarantees. The founders barely skimmed the documents. They trusted her. More accurately, they underestimated her. Those guarantees became anchors. The building lease, renewed under Ayla's entity when the landlord demanded stability. The corporate training license, registered to the individual legally responsible for compliance. The operational certification, non-transferable without regulator approval. At the time, it felt like smart risk management. Now, it was leverage. Ayla sat down and called her lawyer, Daniel. Calm voice. No emotion. They terminated me today, she said. There was a pause. Then a sigh, not surprise, but confirmation. Then we proceed, Daniel replied. Clause 7 allows immediate withdrawal of all license support. That single clause meant everything. Without Ayla's certification, Blackridge could not legally train new employees. Without active training compliance, their existing contracts would be in violation within weeks. And without a valid lease. Ayla opened her laptop and reviewed the agreements one by one. She wasn't looking for loopholes. She knew exactly where the pressure points were. She had written them that way. By evening, formal notices were drafted. Not aggressive, not emotional. Just factual. Notice of license review. Notice of operational risk. Notice of lease reassessment. No threats. No drama. Power doesn't need volume. She scheduled them to be sent the following morning. That night, Ayla slept better than she had in months. Meanwhile, at Blackridge Solutions, executives celebrated quietly. They believed they had removed a liability. An expensive, inconvenient employee who asked too many questions. They didn't realize that the systems they relied on were already ticking toward expiration. Within days, small things began to fail. HR couldn't onboard a new hire. A compliance audit request came back flagged. A major client asked for updated certification documents. No one could find them. The board demanded answers. IT blamed HR. HR blamed legal. Legal blamed the former consultant. Ayla's name was spoken again, this time with unease. By the end of the week, the CFO opened an email marked urgent, regulatory review pending. He stared at the sender. It wasn't a regulator. It was Ayla Carter's legal firm. And for the first time since firing her, Blackridge felt something close to fear. The first official notice arrived on a Monday morning. It didn't come with threats or accusations. No dramatic language. No legal intimidation. Just a clean, professionally worded document titled Preliminary License Compliance Review. By noon, it had reached every executive inbox. The HR director was the first to panic. She read the email 3 times, then forwarded it to legal with a single line. Is this real? Legal confirmed it within minutes. Without an active training compliance license, one registered under Ayla Carter's name, Blackridge Solutions was operating in a grey zone. Not illegal yet, but dangerously close. The CEO called an emergency meeting. People rushed into the same glass conference room where Ayla had been fired days earlier. This time, the seats were filled with tension instead of confidence. Coffee went untouched. Laptops stayed closed. How long do we have? The CEO asked. Legal hesitated. 30 days, at most. Possibly less if an audit is triggered. Silence. No one said Ayla's name at first. But everyone was thinking it. The CFO finally broke. Can we transfer the license? Legal shook her head. It's non-transferable. It's tied to the certified individual. Any attempt to move it would require regulator approval. And how long does that take? Months. The room exploded into overlapping voices. She was just a trainer. We didn't know she controlled this. Why didn't legal flag this before? Because no one had looked closely. They never thought they needed to. By midweek, clients began asking questions. A government-linked partner requested updated compliance documentation before renewing a contract. HR postponed onboarding sessions, claiming internal restructuring. The cracks were spreading. Then came the second notice. This one wasn't about licenses. It was about the building. The lease agreement, held under Ayla's holding company, contained a clause triggered by material operational breach. Termination without cause. Qualified. The property management firm delivered a formal notice of lease reassessment to the reception desk. Executives laughed at first. Eviction. The COO scoffed. She wouldn't dare. But legal didn't laugh. This is enforceable, she said quietly. She's within her rights to review occupancy. The word eviction finally settled into the room. Phone calls followed. Ayla ignored them all. Emails grew longer. More polite. More desperate. Let's discuss. We may have moved too quickly. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding. Ayla didn't reply. She was too busy. Across town, she met with regulators, not as an accuser, not as an employee, but as a licensed professional requesting a routine review. Everything she said was factual. Documented. Calm. No drama. No revenge language. Just compliance. By Friday, Blackridge Solutions was officially listed as under review. The board demanded immediate action. Get her back, someone said. But on what terms? Another replied. That question hung in the air. Because Ayla Carter wasn't an employee anymore. She was a gatekeeper. And every door at Blackridge now led through her. By the following week, Blackridge Solutions no longer felt like a company in control. What once looked like a polished corporate machine now felt fragile, reactive, and exposed. Meetings were no longer about growth or strategy. They were about survival. The CEO finally did what he should have done days earlier. He called Ayla. The phone rang once, twice, then stopped. He tried again that evening. Straight to voicemail. By the third day, the tone of the messages changed. The arrogance disappeared. The authority softened. Ayla, this is Mark. We may have made a mistake. Let's talk. She listened to the voicemail later that night, sitting in her office with the city lights stretching beneath the window. She didn't delete it. She didn't respond. Instead, she forwarded it to Daniel. They're ready, he said after listening. But remember, this is no longer about your job. Ayla knew that. At Blackridge, panic had reached the boardroom. Legal laid out the situation in brutal clarity. Without Ayla's certification, 3 major contracts would be in breach within 2 weeks. Without the building lease, relocation would cost millions, and that was assuming they could move fast enough to avoid shutdown. The CFO slammed his folder shut. She planned this. No. Legal corrected him. She prepared. There's a difference. That distinction mattered now. An emergency board vote was called. The result was unanimous. Negotiate. A formal email was sent, not from HR, not from legal, but from the CEO himself. Subject: request for discussion. No accusations. No defensiveness. Just humility, wrapped in corporate language. Ayla read it carefully the next morning. She agreed to one meeting. Not at Blackridge. Not in a glass conference room. At her office. When the executives arrived, they looked smaller. No assistants. No confident laughter. Just folders and nervous energy. Ayla greeted them politely. Professional. Calm. They offered apologies first. We mishandled the situation. There were misunderstandings. We value your contribution. Ayla let them speak. Then she placed a single document on the table. Let's be clear, she said evenly. I was terminated for alleged fraud without evidence. I will not be returning as an employee. Silence. The CEO swallowed. Then what do you want? Ayla didn't raise her voice. She didn't smile. I want what I already earned, she said. Respect. Control. And legal clarity. Her proposal was simple and devastating. She would allow temporary use of her licenses. She would delay eviction proceedings. In exchange, she would assume full operational authority as an external managing partner. No interference. No board micromanagement. They hesitated. She waited. Finally, legal nodded. She's not asking for ownership. She's asking for control. That was worse. But they had no choice. By the end of the meeting, the power dynamics had flipped completely. They had fired her thinking she was replaceable. Now they were asking for permission to exist. And Ayla Carter was just getting started. The moment Ayla stepped into her new role, everything changed. She didn't announce it with speeches or company-wide emails. Power, she knew, worked best when it moved quietly. Instead, a single internal memo went out from legal. Effective immediately, all operational decisions will require approval from the external managing partner. Her name followed. Reactions spread fast. Managers reread the memo in disbelief. Team leads whispered in hallways. Some executives scoffed, pretending it was temporary. Others felt the ground shift beneath them. Ayla didn't rush into the building. She waited 3 days. Let them sit with the uncertainty. During that time, she reviewed internal reports that had been hidden from her when she was an employee. Financial misstatements. Inflated performance metrics. Managers taking credit for work done by their teams. Systems patched instead of fixed. She finally walked into Blackridge on Thursday morning. No escort. No announcement. Just confidence. The same security guard who had watched her leave weeks earlier nodded this time and opened the gate without hesitation. Inside, she moved department by department, not to intimidate, but to observe. She asked quiet questions, listened carefully, took notes. People spoke freely now. They told her who ignored compliance, who falsified reports, who bullied juniors into silence. Names surfaced. By afternoon, the first executive email went out. Effective immediately, the Director of Operations is on administrative leave pending review. The building froze. By the end of the week, 2 more followed. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. The board tried to intervene. They requested a meeting. Ayla declined. "You asked me to stabilize operations," she replied through legal. "This is stabilization." Behind closed doors, alliances collapsed. Executives blamed each other. Emails leaked. Old grudges resurfaced. One board member tried to undermine her authority by contacting regulators directly. It backfired. The regulators redirected everything back to Ayla, the licensed authority. That's when it became clear. She wasn't just managing operations. She was the operation. Meanwhile, employees began to change. Workloads became reasonable. Processes became clear. Credit went where it was due. For the first time in years, people felt safe. Ayla noticed who adapted and who resisted. Resistance always reveals fear. On Friday evening, she stood alone in the boardroom, looking out over the city through the same glass walls where she had once been accused and dismissed. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "They're fracturing. If you push now, they won't recover." Ayla stared at the skyline. She didn't rush. Because she knew something they didn't yet understand. The collapse wasn't coming from the outside. It was already happening from within. By Monday morning, Blackridge Solutions was no longer pretending everything was fine. The boardroom felt different now. The long table that once symbolized authority had become a place of quiet fear. Chairs were filled, but confidence was gone. No one joked. No one argued loudly anymore. They were waiting. Ayla joined the meeting remotely. Not because she was avoiding them, but because distance made her position clear. She didn't need to sit at their table to control it. The CEO began with numbers. Loss projections. Contract risks. Potential shutdown timelines. His voice trembled despite his effort to sound composed. Then legal spoke. Due to internal instability and continued non-compliance risks, the external managing partner has the right to activate the lease protection clause. Everyone knew what that meant. Eviction. The CFO leaned forward. If she does that, the company won't survive. Ayla finally spoke. "Then you should have protected it," she said calmly. No anger. No satisfaction. Just truth. They tried bargaining. One board member suggested equity. Another offered a public apology. Someone even proposed removing the CEO. Ayla listened. Then she shook her head. "This isn't about punishment," she said. "It's about sustainability. And Blackridge, as it is now, isn't sustainable." Silence followed. She activated the clause that afternoon. The notice was delivered formally. No drama, no press, no leaks. 30 days to vacate. Operations slowed immediately. Vendors paused services. Clients requested contingency plans. Employees panicked, not because of Ayla, but because leadership had run out of lies. Executives turned on each other. Emails surfaced. Old decisions were questioned. Blame was everywhere. The CEO resigned by Wednesday. The board followed within 48 hours. Ayla watched it all unfold without interference. This wasn't her victory lap. It was a reset. On Friday, she walked through the building one last time before the move-out process began. People stopped her in hallways, not to beg, but to thank her. "You didn't break this place," one employee said quietly. "You showed us who did." That night, Ayla signed the final directive. Blackridge Solutions would not continue in its current form. It would end. Something new would rise from the structure she had built, but without the people who had abused it. They fired her for training fraud. Now they were losing the company itself. And the final chapters hadn't even begun. Eviction day didn't come with chaos. It came with silence. The Blackridge Solutions logo was removed from the glass entrance before sunrise. Security badges stopped working one by one. Elevators paused longer than usual, as if even the building understood what was happening. Employees arrived carrying boxes instead of laptops. No speeches. No farewell emails. Just the quiet end of something that had been rotting for years. Ayla arrived mid-morning. Not as an employee. Not as a consultant. As the owner of the space. She walked through the lobby slowly, heels echoing against marble floors she had once crossed unnoticed. The same receptionist looked up, this time with relief, not fear. "You're early," the receptionist said softly. "I didn't want to miss the transition," Ayla replied. Inside, the offices were half empty. Desks cleared. Whiteboards wiped clean. Managers who once ruled floors now avoided eye contact, unsure where they stood in this new reality. Ayla didn't confront them. She didn't need to. By noon, the final executive office was vacated. The doors closed. Blackridge Solutions officially ceased operations that afternoon. But the building didn't stay empty. Within hours, Ayla's legal team finalized paperwork for a new entity. A new name. A clean structure. No inherited arrogance. She sent a single message to select former employees, the ones who had stayed honest, competent, and human through the chaos. "If you want to build something better, be here tomorrow at 9. The response was immediate. They came early. Nervous. Hopeful. Ayla met them not in a boardroom, but in the training hall where she had once taught without recognition. "This time," she said, "we build it right. No inflated titles. No hidden power games. Clear accountability." She rehired based on trust, not politics. Promoted those who had carried teams quietly. Gave credit publicly and corrections privately. For the first time, systems ran clean. Processes were followed because they made sense, not because someone demanded obedience. As the sun set, Ayla stood alone by the window. The same city. The same building. But an entirely different future. Blackridge had collapsed under its own weight. What rose next would stand on something stronger. Respect. The new company didn't announce itself loudly. There was no press release. No flashy launch event. No dramatic rebrand campaign. Ayla believed real strength spoke through results, not noise. Within weeks, the building felt alive again, not rushed, not fearful, but focused. The people she rehired worked differently now. They weren't trying to survive meetings or protect themselves from blame. They were building. Clients noticed first. Emails came in asking familiar questions. "Are you still operational? Are the same teams in place?" Ayla's responses were simple. Yes, yes, and better. Word spread quietly through the industry. Contracts that had stalled during Blackridge's collapse began returning, this time addressed directly to Ayla's new firm. Regulators cleared the new entity faster than expected. Compliance audits passed without friction. Because the systems were finally honest. Former Blackridge executives watched from the outside, stunned. They expected chaos. They expected failure. Instead, they saw efficiency. Ayla didn't take revenge publicly. She didn't speak badly about the past. When asked in interviews why Blackridge failed, she answered calmly. Organizations don't collapse because of one person. They collapse when they stop listening to the people who hold them together. That line traveled far. Employees felt it too. For the first time, promotions were transparent. Feedback mattered. Training wasn't treated as an expense, it was treated as infrastructure. Late one evening, Ayla walked through the open office floor. Screens glowed softly. Laughter echoed from a meeting room, not nervous laughter, but real ease. She paused at a desk where a junior analyst worked late. "You don't have to stay," Ayla said. The analyst smiled. "I want to. This place feels worth it." That was the moment Ayla allowed herself to feel proud. Not because she had one, but because she had built something that didn't need fear to function. Across town, Blackridge's final legal filings were completed quietly. The company name was removed from registries. Its story ended without ceremony. Ayla's story didn't. It continued, stronger, clearer, and finally visible. Only one chapter remained. By the time the dust settled, Ayla Carter stood where few people ever get the chance to stand. Not on a podium. Not in front of flashing cameras. But in the quiet heart of the building she had once built from the shadows. The office hummed around her. Not with fear. Not with resentment. But with purpose. Employees moved confidently. Teams collaborated seamlessly. Systems ran efficiently. Clients were satisfied. Regulators were impressed. Ayla had done more than reclaim what was hers. She had rebuilt it stronger, cleaner, fairer. The lessons of Blackridge Solutions were embedded in every corner. Every workflow. Every decision. She walked to the boardroom window, looking out at the city lights stretching endlessly below. A small smile touched her lips. She remembered the day they had fired her for training fraud. The humiliation. The anger. The betrayal. And then, the quiet moment she had spent planning, not revenge, but restoration. Watching every legal clause, every operational anchor she had secured over the years, waiting for the moment it mattered. It had worked. Blackridge had fallen because it was fragile at its core. Arrogance, neglect, and self-interest had undone the company faster than anyone could react. She didn't celebrate their failure. She celebrated the truth. The truth that competence, integrity, and foresight were not invisible. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Congratulations. They didn't see it coming. They still won't. Ayla chuckled softly. It didn't feel like victory. Not in the traditional sense. It felt inevitable. Because sometimes, the world doesn't reward those who shout the loudest. It rewards those who quietly build the foundation, and then stand firmly when the storm comes. The city below twinkled like a constellation of possibilities. And Ayla Carter. She wasn't just an employee anymore. She wasn't just a consultant. She was a builder, a strategist, a silent force that no one could ignore. They had fired her for training fraud. She had evicted them from their own company. And now, she was unstoppable. She turned, walked back through the office floor, and nodded to the teams already working late. Let's build the future, she said. And for the first time, the words weren't just for them. They were for herself too. The past was gone. The company had changed. But the story was hers forever. Ayla Carter had taken what was hers, not through anger, not through chaos, but through precision, patience, and quiet power. And the world had no choice but to follow.